Hi, everybody, and welcome to 3ds Max 101. I'm Nina Covington. I'll be your teacher's assistant today, and this class will be led by Mark Gerhard. Say hi,
Hello,
Mark.
everybody. Hello.
And also with us is Nelson, who would like to give you some information about the website and BuzzNet. Go for it, Nelson.
Alrighty. So yeah, what we're going to be doing is using a web application called BuzzNet in order to provide a just an alternate chat for students to be able to communicate with each other during class, but also as a means for us to track whether or not you guys are following along or falling asleep. So, what you guys need to do is jump over to buzznet.3dbuzz.com or sta.buzznet.3dbuzz.com, log in with your 3dbuzz username and password, and you will be able to jump into the 3ds Max classroom. Once you're there, throughout the classes, we'll ask people to hit participate if they are wanting to follow along. And if you hit participate, you'll notice three buttons appear on the left-hand side of the program that allow you to say 1 more minute or ready or not ready. Typically, the protocol is what we'll do is we'll reset everybody's ready button to not ready, and then we'll ask people to select 1 more minute if they need more time or ready if they're done. And then if they stay not ready, we'll just, again, assume they've fallen asleep. So go ahead and jump over into BuzzNet if you want to go ahead and participate in the chat and tell us if you need more time to do certain things. For homework, just jump over to the 3D Buzz website. Hopefully all of you guys are enrolled in the 3ds Max class on the site. By hitting enroll, what you're going to be essentially doing is well, signing up for all of the notifications about this particular class, and it will allow you to submit homework as it becomes available. At this point, no homework has been added to the class, but at the end of each class, a homework assignment as well as a due date will be added to each individual week. That homework is then going to be, a button will appear which will allow you to submit that homework in a zip format, and that will be graded and fun stuff like that. And things. So, yeah, I think that's about it, unless anybody has any questions about the format for our classes. And then if nobody does, I'll just go away and hand it over to Mark.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody, to 3ds Max 101. My name's Mark Gerhard. I'll be your game show host for the next 6 weeks. I want to tell you just, if I can keep it to 12 sentences, about myself. I have spent the past 24 years devoting my life to 3ds Max. I'm an artist. I have a degree in sculpture and painting, and I was very lucky that when I got out of college, I spent about 5 years doing presentation graphics, and I learned computer graphics at that point until I was completely bored out of my gourd. And then I heard that Autodesk was thinking about starting a 3D animation program, and they were looking for artists as guinea pigs. So I got in at the very ground floor of this product and learned it, and then was involved in the development of it. Worked for Autodesk for 15 years. And during that time, I also used to freelance doing game development and film shots and architecture. When I got laid off from Autodesk 2004, I wrote some books. I worked for Luxology for a while with Moto. I used to write the tutorials that ship with the product. And then I worked for a Autodesk dealership, which was primarily design visualization. So I spent 3 years in the world of architecture and mechanical engineering, and got to enjoy that world, and did a lot of production jobs. Worked on the Freedom Tower for the SOM in New York. Worked on just a whole bunch of jobs like that. Got laid off from those guys, and I got a position first with a game company called Level 13 Studios, where we made an iPhone game. And I'm going to show you some clips from that iPhone game sooner or later. And I'm going to be basing some of this class on the modeling that happened in that iPhone game. Currently, I work for a company called TurboSquid. TurboSquid is the world's largest 3D marketplace. You guys, if you get good at modeling, or if you're already good at modeling, you can sell models on TurboSquid. We have 20,000 artists selling models on TurboSquid. There's over 250,000 models up there, and that's my day job. So I'm actually a little bit rusty in teaching Max. I'm so glad to be doing this again, because I used to do this nonstop for years and years and years. But in the past 3 years, I've just been working with Max artists and Maya artists and Softimage, Modo, Lightwave, the whole gamut, the whole world. So it's nice to be back in my home.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you. Okay, and so and the chat is on a different computer. I have to actually turn my head to see it, so
Right.
I don't actually keep my eyes on this while I'm talking.
Yeah,
I will stop now and then and look.
Yeah, and I'll be keeping an eye on BuzzNet, but definitely if you have questions that you want answered, make sure to ask them in the questions panel and GoToMeeting, which I'll be watching for you, Mark. So I have your back.
Okay, super. That's great. I'm glad that is up and running with okay, and that's interesting because I don't actually see the questions here for some reason, but that's fine. Oh, there it is. I see it's pulled itself off into a separate little thing. All right. So anyway, so that's enough about me. I feel like I used to introduce myself as 3ds Max's crazy uncle.
There you go.
Because it's this program is about the same age as my youngest kid, and so I really feel like I birthed it back in 1990, and have watched it go through all of its changes. Now, a percentage of you guys are Maya guys, and I will promise not to say bad things about Maya. It's a bad habit that I have, because for 15 years Maya was the enemy when I was at Autodesk, and we were, the poor little 3ds Max trying to fight Alias, in the big time. One of the best jobs I had at Autodesk was being a demo artist, and so my calendar looked like, Monday morning go see George Lucas and show him 3ds Max, and Tuesday go down to Paramount and DreamWorks and Steven Spielberg and show those guys 3ds
nice.
Max. And I didn't, the very first day on the job, I was at Digital Domain showing 3ds Max, not knowing any better that, I should be laughed off of the stage. But it was an interesting time. So anyway, so I know the product pretty well. So without further ado, let's go in and start talking about the product and the things that you have to know. And I've got this little model that I threw up here on stage just so we'd have something to see. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, Reset, and Reset Yes, so it will disappear for a minute. So when you start Max, it may look like this. It probably won't look like this because I've changed the UI. There are different UI schemes that you can use, and the colors, when I think the default is a dark color. I like this better for presenting and for working. I feel like I'm trapped in a dark room when I'm in the dark interface, but I'll show you sooner or later how you can change that. But the thing that I want to do right now, I hope that I don't have any way to actually, I think, make my mouse more visible, so you'll have to just follow the tracking of my mouse. But what I want to simply do is give names to the different parts of the interface so that you'll know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start up in the top left. This green icon here, if I click there, this is called the application menu. So I'll say click the application button. This is where you do things like, save files, import files. And this has changed over the years, but this is where, your standard stuff happens. There's a quick access toolbar up at the top here. I'm not sure, it might have some other name I don't remember right now. I actually rarely use this toolbar because I established my habits before that it showed up, and but you guys may want to. And there are little drop-down arrows that you can click, and you'll see certain things. This is basically where you have your, if you click on these, you'll have your redo, you have your undo, you'll have quick files. The important thing here is that there's a set project folder. Most Macs users don't know about it or use it, but it's actually a semi-useful thing. So quick access bar and the application button. This is very important right here. This is called the menu bar. Each of these are text menus. And if I go to, let's see, one of these like the edit menu and come down here, you'll notice that in addition to the menu item, there is the keyboard shortcut. So if there is a default keyboard shortcut for a particular menu, you'll see it written here. There are keyboard shortcuts assignable to probably 90% of the functions in this product, and probably only 10% of them have been actually assigned. Don't ask me why. Ask Frank DeLeese. He's the product manager. Okay, but you can assign those. Advanced users in the room under the Customize menu, under Customize User Interface. Let's see what happens. Under Keyboard, this is a list of all of them, and you can see if something has an assignment, it is assigned there. So Maya users, you can start to assign things here, but it's not going to help you with navigation, viewport navigation, which is really what you care about.
Chris is asking if you change or add keyboard shortcuts, do those menus update?
No, these menus do not update, and this is okay. I need a different word instead of stupidity. This is what they have here is a little button at the bottom that says Write Keyboard Chart. And so what you can do is after you have all of your keyboards assigned that you want, you click Write Keyboard Chart, and it actually writes out a little chart which you can then print out on a piece of paper and stick it on your wall. And that's how you remember what you did. It works. It's not elegant. So hope that helps you with that. Okay, so back to basics. We call this the menu bar. And right under here, very important, this is called the main toolbar. And the main toolbar, if you happen to have, okay, I'm going to go restore down. And now you can see the main toolbar. If your menu, if you're running on a notebook or on some smaller thing, that this is one of the ways that Macs has a kind of unusual interface is that things will scroll so that you can get to them like this. So you can see the main toolbar works in that way. Now when I have it up like this, there's nothing like that. One other thing that will happen to you, a certain percentage of the things I'm going to teach you are not things you want to use. They're things that are going to happen to you by accident. So things like if you click on this and drag, all of a sudden you can unhook the main toolbar. And then I'll have to drag it back up here, and then it will reappear. So this is not as modern an interface as Modo is a good example of something that has probably the most modular interface in the world. Every single window you can just program and do what you want. But once you get in here, the interface doesn't really kill you. It doesn't really get in the way. Although, you know, it depends on what you're used to. Okay, so this is the main toolbar. Also, we have a very important section over here called the command panels. So each of these buttons here is a different panel. And if you put your mouse over any of these panels, you get a tool tip. There's little icons here. There's my joke. Icons are short for I can't figure out what these little pictures are. And that's why they have tool tips. any place where you have an icon in Max where there's no tooltip, you will appreciate tooltips, because you go like, what the heck is that? I don't know. What is that supposed to be a picture of? I can't believe there are people whose job is to make pictures in 24 pixels. But, yeah, life could be worse, right?
Right, definitely.
So, so this is the command panels. So if I say go to the modify panel, that's right there. If I say go to the hierarchy panel, that's right there. Go to the motion panel, it's right there. Go to the display panel, right there. Go to the utility panel, go right there. So that's the only place there are panels. And then the other thing that you'll notice that Max has is that everything is, it's going to be context sensitive. So the things that show up in the interface are based on what's selected. Right now, if I click on the Modify panel, there's nothing selected, and so nothing appears here. But when I have something selected, when I go back to the Modify panel, you'll see that this will suddenly be filled up with stuff. Okay, traveling around, down at the bottom here, we have two areas that are very important for you to know. When I say go there, that's what they are. These buttons down here, I call these the navigation tools. And it's funny, I was the tech writer. I used to write the help system and the tutorials, and we were insane about people saying exactly the right names for things. And I've been away long enough that I don't exactly remember what they're supposed to be called. So I will try and look at the help system and see if I've taught you anything wrong. But these are the navigation tools down here. And Maya users, if you train yourself to use these for a while, then it won't drive you crazy that you can't do Alt left mouse button or whatever your mouse button routines are. Okay, so this is called the Viewport Navigation tools down here. And these tools are going to change based on the kind of viewport you have. So you will see that this context sensitivity can really drive you crazy if you don't take some time to understand what's going on. Okay, next to them we have some buttons here. We used to call these the VCR control buttons. They're the playback buttons for animation. And right under it there's a time configuration button. So we'll be going through all these extensively. Down here, I'm switching over to the left-hand side. Let me just make something in here for a second. I'm just going to make a box so that you can see some stuff as I'm working here. So I've made a box, and as soon as I made the box, now you can see the command panel has filled up with some stuff. And so this is the time ruler here. There's the time slider. And then this is the time ruler here. Underneath that, we have a section. If I drag this out here, right down here, this is where MaxScript lies. This is called the mini listener, and we'll see. We'll get into that late in the class. We won't be doing scripting in the class very much, but or probably at all. But we'll show you a little bit of that. Right next to it here, we have something called the prompt area and status line. So notice that it says one object selected. This is sort of, I think this is a joke, which is that Max always gives you the very important information where you're not going to think of looking for it. So right down here, this is where it's telling you, click and drag to begin the creation process. One object selected. Train yourself as you're doing something and you go, huh, what? Look over here and see if there's any kind of clue happening. That's where it is. Okay, then we have a section over here with the XYZ, and that XYZ, these are the transform type-ins or the coordinate rollouts. As I move something, you can see in the coordinate rollouts that there are some values that appear there, and you can see that there are some spinners here that I can use to change that. There's little icons hiding in here to change between relative mode and absolute mode. There's a one that lets you lock the selection. There's some odd little things. Progressive display, I don't even know. I think that's adaptive degradation, we'll find out. Some various things in here I'm not going to go into. A big picture. The only other thing that I'm missing right over here, these are the animation tools for doing keyframing. So if I choose auto key and I move the time slider, let's say to frame 30, and I move this over here, then I've just created animation through auto key. I'll turn that off before I forget. And you'll notice now that there are keyframes that are now associated with it. So that gives you a quick tour of the interface. I've ignored this section up here at the top. This is something that Autodesk inserted. I don't know what they call it. It is something that appears in, I think, all Autodesk products. There's something called the Communication Center, something called the Subscription Center, something called Search, but this is not really something that has anything to do with Max itself. It's not specific to Max. Okay, so I left out all four of these windows, which is in most of the interface, and these four windows are the viewports. So we have the viewport that is highlighted in yellow is the active viewport. If I click on a different viewport, then it is highlighted in yellow. And so this is the default layout, and I'll show you sooner or later how to change your layout so you can have a different layout of windows. This is one of the things that is very, very old in the product. I think it was 95 was the first version of Max that came out, if I remember, 94, 95. And this is deeply embedded in Max. It's not something that they can really change dramatically. So in recent versions of Max, we're using 2012. I think it was in 2013 that they came up with a real quick way to jump to different viewport layouts. You know, maybe it's even in 2012 and I just don't know it. I'll have to go investigating. But let me see if I can remember where this is. Under Customize, under Preferences, there should be a Viewports. No, it's not there. And this is the one thing that is going to happen on occasion, is because Max is so deep that occasionally I have to remember where something is, and I think it's maybe over here. Configure viewports. There it is. I found it. Okay, layout. So here you can see under configure viewports, let's go back and show you that again. There's a little button here. The problem with this program is they keep changing from release to release to release. Well, maybe it's not a problem, but they keep making it better. But that means that us teachers have to keep staying up to date with the product. So this didn't used to be there for the past 22 years, and now recently, if you click this plus button, it will show you configure viewports down there, and then all these menus. So under layout, this is where I could be changing to a layout like this. If I'm doing film work, this is what I like to use, because then I can do a HD widescreen here. If I'm doing architectural work, I tend to use something like this. You know, if I'm doing work that's animation work, a lot of times I'll use two views like this, where I'll put a schematic view in one window. And no, I don't want to hear about Apple. Okay, and so anyway, I'm going to cancel this now because I'm just giving you a sort of a heads up of where things are. So that completes the very first part of the outline, which is a map of the interface. So as I'm going along, I will try to always say where I'm going so that you can understand that. One other thing I forgot to show you, which is really kind of critical, is that, and this is, I'm not sure if this is unique to Max. I think Photoshop might have this as well, but I don't know if Maya has it now. the products are getting closer and closer together every release, is the flyout. So if I go to one of these icons, and you'll see some of the icons, like this teapot one, has a tiny little corner. And if I press and hold, then a new menu, several menus appear under it. So if you're looking for something like here, you can find that, oh, look, there's all these other things hiding down here. So sometimes you can't just find something by looking for it. You have to know that it's hiding here. It's hiding under another icon through a flyout. In fact, I think that's about 50% of learning any product is memorizing where the heck things are. How do I get to the thing? How do I get to the thing so I can do that? How do I get to the thing? And that's why it drives you crazy. Once you know Maya and you want to switch to Max, once you know Max, you want to switch to Maya. That's what really can drive you insane. Autodesk once, when I was an application engineer, they brought all of us into a 3-day retreat in New Orleans, and they proceeded to torture us by making us do 1 hour of Max, then 1 hour of Maya, then 1 hour of Softimage, then another hour of Max, then another hour of Maya, then another hour of Softimage. And so, you know, the left side of the room would groan for 1 hour, and then the right side of the room would groan for the next hour.
That's
and
great.
The one guy who did Softimage would be groaning the whole time. Anyway, so we can all be sympathizing with each other here. I tend to think that once you learn the software, whatever software you learn first becomes your true love, and this is either romance or religion. Take your pick.
Right.
But these are either religious wars or it's, you know, my girlfriend, my boyfriend is better than yours.
Right.
So you know, that's okay. All right, so let me kill this, delete this, and I want to show you some viewport navigation. Actually, I'm going to undo that. Control Z is the undo. I could have done the undo by clicking over here. And this is something that I like to show you, is that Max has a history. It's not quite as robust as Maya's history, but it lets you say, you know, I want to go all the way back to there. No, I changed my mind. I want to go all the way back to here. No, change my mind. I want to go all the way back to here, and it will take you back to wherever you want. This is a bad program if you can't make up your mind. You can spend a lot of time fiddling around. You know, it's supposed to be a productivity tool, but you will endlessly be fiddling around with changing your mind if you don't make some artistic decisions. Okay, one other thing that I didn't show you, which I like to show, is that the very bottom right-hand button, Maximize Viewport Toggle. That lets you take the 4 views, and whichever one is active, it makes that maximized. And I like to work this way, mostly because when I worked in architecture, the viewport redraws will kill you when you've got a 8 million poly or 20 million poly model trying to redraw in 4 viewports at once. Okay, so viewport navigation is the next thing on my outline. One other thing I want to mention is that there's a grid that you'll see here. This is called the home grid. There are 3 little menus up here. They have some non-intuitive name. I'll just tell you to click on the one that says perspective or the one that says realistic when we need to. This one defines the shading modes. This one defines which viewport it is, and this one has all the other tools that aren't in the other ones. So to do a viewport navigation, I want to go through, there are so many different ways to do viewport navigation. It's kind of ridiculous, but it still is good for you to know about. Okay, does space maximize?
Someone had a question about the undos. They're wondering how many undos you have, and is there a place to change it?
Yes, it is unlimited, supposedly, based on how much memory you have. On the Customize menu, if you go to Preferences, this is really great for me to remember all these things that I haven't thought of for a million years. Scene undo levels set to 20 right there. Hey, go ahead and set that to 200 if you want. I dare you. I have to say that Max is not it used to be the world's most stable program before they put it on Windows. When this was a DOS program, release 4, it never crashed on me. I don't think I ever saw it crash on me in 9 months. Now it's you almost can't help but crash because Max's great feature is also its worst problem, which is that anyone that buys Max gets the software developer kit and they can make their own plugins. And of course, nobody does QA on these plugins. So you can fill up your software with things that Autodesk has no clue whether, or control over.
Right.
And my 2012 is filled up with, different plugins that I have to use for different production jobs. I've got some V-Ray. I've got some, I've got a PSD Manager. I've got all kinds of things from half a dozen different people. But what that means is that if Max doesn't crash on you within 2 hours, you're exercising. You're not exercising the right parts of it. And because of that, it's a really good idea to save your work frequently.
I was just going to say.
There is a thing called Auto Backup. And if I go to the Files menu, down here, Auto Backup, everyone pay attention. If you have to do real work in the program, the first thing you should do is go to Files and make sure this is enabled. And I would change this to something that is more like 20. But if you're working on big scenes, this is going to drive you bananas. So I usually set this to about 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Depends on, no, seriously, if you're working on seriously large files, it will take 2 minutes or 3 minutes to save the file. And you just go crazy with the fact that all of a sudden your Mac seems to be freezing up because it's saving. So you don't want that to happen every 5 minutes. But right now, this is going to be saving to AutoBack, and that's what the file name will be, and we'll get into that in a while there. Spacebar, someone asked WYKK, does Spacebar maximize in Max? No, it does not. However, who knows if you can go over to Customize User Interface and come over here. I don't think you can assign spacebar as one of those commands. So I'm sure that's what it does in Maya. In fact, speaking of customized user interface, the great thing is that almost everything is in here. The bad thing is you have to guess what they named it.
Right.
They did not name it what you think they named it. So, if you have spare time, I recommend that you actually read this whole blankety blank list. And to make matters worse, you think you're done, but then you click here and discover that that's just one list.
Oh, no.
Look at that.
Wow.
And this is one of the things that whenever somebody comes up with some super cool new tool, they can put it in through here so that it's got its own list. And then there's categories. And look, so you got your work cut out for you. So what we were talking about, maximize, viewport maximize. Now, what is it called in here? It's called maximize viewport. So, of course, the first thing I would look for would be maximize, and at least I can do this. I can go M on the keyboard, and that'll take me down here. But I will guarantee you that there's maximize viewport toggle is Alt W. Well, I knew that. It's short for window. But if you try to go and assign spacebar, look at that. You can do that. Okay, Maya man, you are good. Yeah. Okay. So WYKK, you can make this the spacebar, and of course, now I don't want to do that, so I got to make sure I put back Alt. Whoops. How about if I just close the window? Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about viewport navigation for quite a bit longer, sorry to say. But what I'm going to show you is I'm going to sort of take you through the history of viewport navigation in Macs quickly. There are buttons down here that do viewport navigation. So if you click on this one, that's the zoom button, and then press and drag. You press the right mouse button down. You can drag in and out. I'm going to make a couple other objects over here. And I'm going to make a guy over here like that. Okay, so what I want you to see is that if I want to zoom in on that, it doesn't track the mouse. I have to go to Customize, Preferences, and I have to change under Viewports to Zoom About Mouse Point. In the next release of Macs, this is going to be the default. I'm lucky I'm still on the beta. Now, notice that now I can zoom to where I want to. Okay, so that's the zoom button. I use that because I like to do this. Now, most people that I know who aren't, haven't been using this product all that long, naturally gravitate toward the wheel of the mouse. And sure enough, the wheel of the mouse will do that. So, and that's the same as Maya, yes? So you can chalk that one off. And now, if you don't have a wheel, you press the mouse button. No, what is it? I can't even remember what it is. Is it Alt plus that? Is it Control plus that? Is it Shift plus that? I don't remember. But of course, you have a wheel, so I won't worry about that. But anyway, I don't like using the wheel that much just because I'm in the habit of doing this and being able to zoom where I want. But I do know that it's nice to zoom back and forth like that with the wheel. So that's a good thing. Okay. So that's zooming in and out. Now the next thing, moving side to side, the hand here, pan view. Click on that, side to side, up and down. And I'll right-click to cancel that. If I want to pan, Alt. No, I'm trying to remember. Okay, so Control, middle mouse button. Control, middle mouse button is pan. So Maya guys, you're used to, is it Control left mouse button? It's been so this is this was our attempt at Autodesk before they bought Alias to make things the same. So they thought, well, all right, Control middle mouse button, pan, and then that way so you learn how to do that. You can do that pretty quickly. I have that as a muscle memory. It's certainly convenient, more convenient than running up and down to this stuff all the time. Instead, what you tend to do is find out the keyboard shortcuts for these and use them. Now, one thing that'll drive you crazy is if you happen to choose this instead, then this is walkthrough mode, which comes from video game technology. And this is using the WASD tools on the keyboard, just like you go through a, this is an interactive. I'm pressing the left mouse button down and I'm pressing the W. And if I go D, S, or A, it's just like being in a video game.
Steve asked, isn't just MMB pan?
MMB also is pan, yes. Yep, you got it. So I'm going to put this back to here. So already I've shown you like 4 different ways to pan. And this is the other interesting behavior of Macs, which is if Macs can do something, you can guarantee that it will give you 3 or 4 ways to actually get there and do it. Doesn't mean you have to know them. Macs has like 3,000 features, and at $3,000, it's $1 a feature. But you don't have to use all of them. You can. The truth is most people I know who are super good at this, I look at them and I realize they're only using like 12 things. They're just doing those 12 things over and over and over and over and over again. It's very similar to real artists. They know how to take a pencil and they just scratch with that pencil and keep scratching with it, and all of a sudden it's Leonardo da Vinci.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back. So we've got pan, we've got zoom, and then we've got orbit. Now, orbit is going to drive you crazy, and I am sorry, but it has driven me crazy for 25 years, and I've had to learn how to deal with it. Now, if I have an object selected, and in order to select an object, I'm going up to the main menu, and I'm choosing Select Object, and I'm clicking here. And this is not the main menu, main toolbar. I'm clicking Select Object, and then if I click on an object, it gets selected. So once I have an object selected, then the orbit button, I'm going to press down on this, and you're going to see that there's 3 different orbit choices. There's one that's green in the middle, there's one that's white in the middle, and then there's one that's white and green. And if I choose this one, it says Orbit Subobject. If I choose that one, it says Orbit. And if I choose that one, it says Orbit Selected. So if the object is selected, then Orbit Selected will select around the selected object. If this object is selected, watch carefully. Notice that that object is kind of like there's a pin in the middle of it, and then that becomes the center of the rotation. This one is selected. And again, I've shown you something. Right-click. If you right-click in the viewport, you get this menu. This is the closest we've come to having marking menus, Maya guys. And there used to be a plug-in for marking menus, and Autodesk took it out because they were afraid that Alias was going to sue us.
Oh, no.
And they never put it back in. That's the one thing that I've learned enough Maya to know that gestural menus really make sense. But anyway, so maybe Frank Delise put that back in. Frank, if you happen to listen to this somehow. Okay, so now orbit selected. So the problem is if you don't know that and you happen to be like this and you do an orbit, nothing selected, this is what usually happens, is everything flies off screen and you don't know what the heck you're doing. Okay. So select objects before you orbit around them, and use the orbit selected, and don't use the one that says just orbit, because that one will tend to drive you crazy. Now, the other thing that's very important is once you have the orbit, if you're using this, you'll notice that if I choose it, and let's go pick the one I said to use, that now you have this navigation orb, this yellow little circle with these little things here. And notice if I put my mouse over this, the icon changes. This means I'm going to only orbit in one plane. Over here, I'm only going to orbit in one plane. If I'm inside here, now I'm going to orbit freely in 2 planes. Now, while I'm doing this, Max cleverly is showing you something where you wouldn't think to look. Way down here at the bottom, notice X, Y, and Z. This is the world tripod, I believe is called something like that. That's showing you the world view. Okay, Maya guys, sorry, Max is Z up. Maya is Y up, Max is Z up. So get used to it. I don't think you can change it. And when you make your stuff in Maya and then you bring it into Max, it will come in on its side, lying on its side, because Max is Z up. And that's because it comes from Autodesk that makes AutoCAD, and architects look at plan views. And so for them, that's just the way it is, sorry. But the good news is that that thing is there. So if you find yourself like this, you can look over here and go like, oh, I'm standing on my head. I'm upside down. And you can figure out and replace it like that, and so forth. Now, if you step outside of this orbit, notice you now have a icon that looks like a snake chasing its tail. And if you proceed to do that, you will see that it's totally uncontrollable and will drive you absolutely crazy. Max has two different undo stacks. Shift-Z is the undo stack for the viewport changes. And if I go to Views, Viewport Undo, Shift-Z, Viewport Redo, Shift-Y. Okay. If I right-click to end that, Alt, middle mouse button, gives you the same thing. I use that a lot while I'm working. Just come around like that, and you're done. Now, obviously, you can see that this is, pretty complex to remember all this stuff, and especially if you're not a Max user, that this is all you do all day long is Max user. My joke used to be there's no such thing as a casual Max user. Unfortunately, there are a lot of casual Max users, but there's no such thing as a good, casual Max user.
Right.
So Autodesk tried to actually fix that with this thing. So this thing up at the top, what the heck do they call that? They call that the where did they put this? Right here. They call that the view cube. There's the view cube and the steering wheels. So when you first start up Max, you'll get something that looks like this. This is called the steering wheel. And this has, look at this, pan, zoom, rewind, center, walk, look, up, down, orbit. Those things ring a bell. Those are all the same things we've been talking about, right? So I hate this thing because I don't know. The first thing that I learned to do when in each new version of Max is turn that thing off. And I think that that's sort of universal for most old users. However, new users may once in a while look. There's a miniature version of it. But in any case, I'm going to, now that I've shown you that, first thing I learned to do is how to turn that off. But the other thing, the view cube, actually is kind of works. I hate to say it, but so it lets me do this. So I can go, I can click here, and that zooms around to the left view. I can click up here, that takes me to the top view. I can click on this little home button, and that brings me back there. And this I love. This, I use it. And I can right-click, and I can set a particular view as home. So, and if I press on it, I can just roll around like this. Why is this good? Because this is in Maya, this is in Max, this is in Softimage, this is in Revit, this is in Inventor, this is in all Autodesk products. If you know how to make your way around in one of them and you use this thing, you can use it in all of them. So what's bad about it? Well, it's up in the corner. It's the same problem with this down here. Obviously, you don't want to have to move your mouse back and forth, especially if you have a gigantic monitor. It can get really tiring. On the other hand, it's good exercise. So,
there you go.
Okay. And NATO says, yes, he learns the hard way, view cube, through years of screaming. Most pointless. You can make Max, yeah. Sahiro is mentioning about Max being Z up. Actually, when you do import, you have the option usually. If you're going through OBJ or if you're going through, what am I thinking of? OBJ is probably the most common way you would do that, but or FBX, that you usually have the option of switching from Z up to Y up on your way in. So that's it's not that big a deal. The one thing that I've really gotten a lot of experience at TurboSquid is moving from one program to another. It's just it just doesn't. The world doesn't exist anymore where you just live in one program. Although if you're a little shop you get hired by a particular company, they use what they use. Some shops are Maya, some shops are Max. Especially in the film world, I can't remember which guy wants to be in the film world, but in that one, they'll use whatever. So you're not gonna be able to get away with just knowing one program. Okay, viewport navigation. I think I've beaten that topic to death. But you'd think so, but there's actually a lot more. There's a lot more. And that's some of these tools that are my favorite tools inside of Max. If I click on an object, there are buttons down here that are called Zoom Extents. And Zoom Extent selected lets me jump right to a particular object. So if I get a file from somebody and there are, let's say, 6,000 objects in the scene, which is pretty common, I can go up here to the main toolbar, select by name, and pretend this list runs on and on all the way down the block and around the corner. And I can go, okay, let's find the one that's named whatever it is, and I pick it and say okay, and then I go zoom selected, and that means I can jump right to it. And then I can go orbit selected, and I can orbit around it, and I can do my modeling, I can do my texturing, I can animate it, I can do what I want, zoom back from it, and I like that. That's a pretty darn useful tool. Now, I think is it F in Maya that's framing. If you do zoom extents without doing selected, that's also reasonably useful. And yes, you could change the key to, and I'm just reading okay, at the end of the day, they do the same job. I don't know which is the better tool for, there isn't a better tool. Yeah, okay, so this is true that my experience is that people love modeling in Max. I rarely find people that love modeling in Maya. Unless they're good modelers and they don't use anything else. Luxology's made their fortune on being a modeling tool for people who use Maya. Animation and rigging tends to fall into Maya for professional use. But again, whatever you know how to use, you can use. So there's an awful lot of good animation. I know rigging and animation in Max. I don't know it in Maya. I know it so well in Max that, that's what I'm comfortable with, and I feel tongue-tied in the other program. So what you'll find is if you're going to Unity or other game engines, that you really have to look at the particular game engine and look at what it is they support. One of the things you'll find about Max is that it's got all kinds of very cool things and cool tools that don't, that don't actually make their way out of the program. Or you have to basically bake it all down to vertex animation to get out into a game engine. Unless your game engine supports morph targets and happens to support the Max ones, there's a lot of that going on. So, yeah. And also I see some people talking about polys versus NURBS. So Maya began as a NURBS program when it was, what was it, Power Animator. Before it was Maya, it was only NURBS, and in fact, they only added, like in 5 releases ago, the ability to make polygonal objects at all. Basically, Max has, most people I know go crazy for Max's polygon tools. Not wanting to really go too much there, but if I click here on the graphite modeling tools for a second, it's going to take a second. Oh, Mark, you shouldn't have done that. It's going to crash it. Hold on. Okay. So there are all these, and if I change this to tabs, there we go. Okay, so Max has this huge amount of tools. You're not seeing them here. I'm going to hide it for now, but it's worth learning poly modeling in Max. It really is enjoyable. It's funny because I used to actually go around the world telling people, shh, don't tell your boss, but this is more fun than what you're doing. So, Max, don't tell your wife, this is more fun than what you're doing. People say, well, what's your favorite video game, Mark? My favorite video game is modeling in Max. I would rather be modeling in Max than doing almost anything because it's fluid, it's flexible, it's pleasurable. In fact, I spent a few years going around telling people, actually, Max is a drug. Masquerading. There'll be recovery groups. Make sure you get up once a day. Don't forget to bathe. Because it's addictive. So anyway, I mean, I hope you enjoy hearing that, because it actually is a kind of a fun thing. Okay, so we covered viewport navigation. Wow, we're already an hour into it, and I've made it all the way to the second thing in my outline.
Yay!
Okay, I'm going to speed this up a little bit, and my suspicion is I'm not going to get all the way through both sections, but that's okay. We take it slow, and then we'll ramp up. Okay, so I'm going to reset for a second, and then go through some basic things of working with Macs. And one of the very first things, which isn't actually on my outline that I remembered to do, is units. So if you go to the Customize menu and go down to Units Setup, you will see it says System Unit Setup, Display Unit Setup. Macs, when you open up Macs, it is set to generic units. Now, if you use generic units and say OK, then I'll click over here and I'll make a box. And you'll see that the box says that it's 36.977 length, width 37.228, height 37.651. I can immediately click here and I can say, let's make that 30, tab key. Let's make that 20, tab key. Let's make that 33, tab key. And you can see that you can type in values. If I come over here and I choose unit setup and I set the units to be US standard and say OK, notice my units are now in feet and inches. I work a lot in the mechanical and architectural worlds, and they want real-world scale, real-world objects. When somebody says, how big is that box, they don't want to say it's 30. Yeah, 30 what?
Right.
No, it's just 30. No such thing. Now, if you're in the games world, the fact is that you still actually want to, usually your game engine actually has certain limitations. So it's a good thing to do. Okay. But for the purposes of this particular class right now, I'm going to put the units back to generic, since it seems to me that I don't see anybody in the room that said that they were in the design viz space. So this will make things a little simpler. Okay, so that's unit setup. Now, one other thing about unit setup, and I'm sorry to barrage you with information, but these are things that you should hear. Do not click on System Unit Setup and then proceed to change this to anything you darn well please. Okay? Now, I know I'm an artist. Who are artists? Artists are people who don't follow the rules, don't listen to what anybody's saying, and are completely, courageous about just poking at any old button. So don't do that. Please don't do that. Now, right now, my unit setup is set to meters, and in fact, my usual max default is inches. And I will do what I told you not to do. I'm going to reset it. But before I do it, I want you to look down here and see, look what this says, resulting accuracy, distance from origin. What is this about? Max uses something called floating point mathematics. Okay? Floating point mathematics means that it rounds up. It as numbers are coming into the system, it says, oh, look at that great big number. I'm just going to call it 17. Oh, look at that great big number. I'll call that one 16. So what that means practically is that as long as you are close to the origin in Max, everything is fine. As soon as you are far away from the origin, resulting accuracy means that when you try to move something that's a mile away from the origin and you pick it up and you try to move it, well, it interprets the slightest movement of your mouse to be a large distance. And so the object jumps. And so you get inaccurate results. If I happen to be working on a model of Utah, I need to set this to miles. Otherwise, I can't deal with it. If I'm working on a model that has microns that's very, very, very small, very fine tolerances, I will set this to centimeters or millimeters. But for the most part, I'm going to leave it in inches, and that'll be fine. Don't change this unless you know what you're doing. This one, you can change, doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the way Max is operating. It changes the numbers you're seeing here. Okay? Enough said. Anybody coming in here from Europe? If you're coming in from Europe, you can set it to meters and feel comfortable. And in fact, most of our TurboSquid artists are in metric. So we do that. But I'm going to set it back to generic units and say, okay. This is particularly nasty when you when you're worried about UV mapping or when you're worried about particle effects, because a lot of those procedural things, you don't want to change this in the middle of doing something because, suddenly your lights, all sorts of things go crazy. So that's important. I know it's slow, but let's make sure you know that. Okay, now, creating objects. If we have the Create panel here, and the Create panel has a bunch of different icons here for things you can create. This is the one that creates geometry. Here you create shapes. Here you create lights, cameras, helpers, space warps, systems. I'll go back to standard primitives to this one, create geometry. And now you have a drop-down list. And then here you have all sorts of things you can create. Now we're just going to start with a standard primitive. And I'm going to make, once again, I'll make a box over here in the corner. And this is something that I want you to start learning to do. When you make something, there's a name and color rollout. And right then and there, I'm going to name this. I'm going to name it the Bank of Mark. Okay, that's the Bank of Mark. And then over here, we're going to have the Nelson Building. And then over here, I'm going to have one that is Nina Palace.
Yay!
Okay. All right. So why did I do that? Because there's nothing worse than getting a file from somebody with 6,000 objects that are named Box 01, Box 02, Box 03. You need to know that. And you need to practice it. And I'm doing this 20 years and I still don't do it. So that's a good thing to do. Now, naming objects and selecting them. I'm going to make a few other objects here just to do that. And one thing that's driving me crazy is there's a default here, but I'll have to, which is making everything the same color. Now let me see if assign random colors is on. So I have design visualization defaults that are set in my system, so that every object that I'm making is picking up the color from the layer. And we'll get to that in a while, but for the meantime, just put up with the fact that all these are the same color. Now, if I want to change the color of one of these, maybe I'll say, okay, that's going to be green, and now it's green. I'll pick this one. In the name and color rollout, I'll make this beige, and I'll leave that one to brown, just like that. Okay, I'm going to make a couple other objects here. I'll make a cone. Now, making any object with Max, down here where you didn't think to look, it says click and drag to be in process. Press and drag. And so it'll make the first dimension. Release your mouse. It'll make the second dimension. Click again. It'll make the third dimension. And then that tool stays active for you to make cones until you are sick of making cones. So I made all these cones, and notice that I'm also making them on the grid or near the grid. If I was to make one way over here, I would also be making it very far in the distance. Train yourself not to do that. to demonstrate. Now, I don't know how far in the distance it made it. It wasn't very far. But if I had a view that was more like this, and then I chose to do it up here, I would notice already I'm having an issue with what I'm doing. And notice that I don't see it in the other viewports. I'm going to call this far away cone. And now what happens if I do zoom extents? I'll zoom extent that button. And now look, it seems like everything disappeared. There's that cone that's so far away. Now, of course, I can do zoom extents on my far away cone in that viewport. That viewport's active, and that's why it takes it there. Come there, and I'll do zoom extents selected, and there it is. But it's a bad thing to do. Don't do it. I'm going to delete that cone, and I'm going to do zoom extents selected in all 4 views, and now I'm back to where I was. Okay, so let's make this one view for a second here and pan it. Oh, why don't I use my favorite tool over here? There we go. Okay, so now I've made some objects, and I made some different objects like this to teach you quickly about selecting objects. Max has lots and lots of tools for selecting. Okay, and it looks like there's some people talking about stuff, but I don't need to worry about those things. Let's go ahead with selecting. Okay, so the thing about selecting is Max has some simple things and some complex things about selection. Up here on the main toolbar, we have tools for selecting. We have a tool that says Select Object. We have another one that says Select by Name. I click here, you can see that I've got 5 objects named cone. And I'll cancel. I'll get out of that for a second. And then we have rectangular selection with a fly off and a bunch of different selection tools there. And then we have another one here that says window crossing. So the simplest thing is to click on an object. Now notice that cone is still active here. So as far as Max is concerned, I'm not selecting objects. I'm still making cones. And if I want to select another object and I click, it's not letting me do that. Now I could right-click and choose Select, and that would give me that. I think it's Q on the keyboard. Nope, it's not. Okay, if I have Move selected and I choose Q on the keyboard, that takes me to Select Object. But I tend to do this because I actually really like using the right-click menus because they're right under your fingertips. Wherever I am, right-click, there it is. Select. Don't have to go at a great distance.
Makes sense.
I can select any object and just click on it, and I get the one object. If I want multiple objects, I can just drag a rectangle around the objects like that. I can get 3 objects. Here, I'll get those objects. Now, there's 2 different ways that this drag around things works. This one here says window crossing. And you can see there's an object and there's a little marquee, dotted line marquee that's crossing it. If I go like this, if I have window crossing selected, anything that my window crosses gets selected. So if I go like that, I got all 3 of those objects. So I could get like, start here, go like that, and get all 3 of those objects. Now if this gets changed to window, now the only objects that will be selected will be the ones that are within the window completely. That's very useful sometimes. But just simply be aware that these 2 behaviors exist. That's the important thing. Now, if I select one and I want to add multiple things, I can hold down the Control key, and you can see a little plus button appears on my cursor. So I can click. Let's suppose I want to say this one and that one. Control key does that. Now, they recently changed the behavior of Macs a few releases ago. It used to be that the control button also was a toggle. So you could click again and remove them. And this used to drive everybody insane because you were picking like hundreds of things, and then suddenly the thing behind the thing was being deselected. So now to deselect, you use the Alt key. It's not a big deal, but it really works good. Okay, so that is a way to select objects. There are other selection tools here. I have a circular selection. I have a dotted line selection. This one, I just click and go like that, and I'll miss that one, and I'll get that one. I'll come over here and get this one, miss that one. And then when I get to the end, I click, and it's like that. I got another one that's a draw, just like Photoshop. And this one works really nicely if I have a huge amount of things. Paint. Just my mouse button is just pressed down. I'm just painting over things. Just like that. So now you know those all exist. Mostly, why do you want to know they exist? Because you'll be picking them by accident. And then you'll be saying, how come it doesn't work?
Right.
Because you picked it by accident. The thing that drives me the most crazy, now how to say this positively, about Max is that a lot of the time you'll find that Max decides that you want to move things.
Right.
It's like Max is always so helpful. It's always going like, oh, I'll bet he wants to move things. So half the time you go to select something, you'll find that this button is selected. So I have the habit of going like, oh, wait a minute, hit Q on the keyboard. Well, if you hit Q on the keyboard once, it goes from select over to select object. But if you hit it again, then it starts cycling through these. So that can drive you crazy. Okay, so that's selecting objects. Again, if you will take the time to name things appropriately, then you can also select by name. So here in this button, I can say, let's get rid of, let's say display none, and let's just display just the geometry, and let's find cone, and now we have all the cones selected. Use the keyboard, name things. Okay. Basics.
I was wondering, Mark, we've been recording for a little over an hour. If this would be a good time for a break?
Sure.
Or give everybody a chance to, if anybody has any questions, ask them now, and then we'll take a 10-minute break so everybody can go run and use the restroom. Get a drink of water.
Will do.
Anyone have?
We'll take a 5-minute break here,
Okay,
or?
5-minute break. All right.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions before we go on break? Please ask them in the questions panel. We're watching now.
Should we get the 2012 version? You don't have to. You really don't have to. Okay, so C. Ilution wants to know. It's certainly not required, and I don't think that any of the things we're going to cover in the entire class will be specific to 2012. Generally speaking, most production houses that I know skip a release. So when 2014 comes out, I'll expect some people to be switching from 2012 to 2014. I don't see a lot of people using 2011. I see them using 2010. Actually, I see a lot of 2009, but it depends on get whatever you want. The truth is, if you have this already, if you are students, Autodesk gives you a 3-year license for free. But I don't think you can get 2012. I think you have to get 2013. I may be wrong. 2012 may still be out there for you, available to you. The one headache that you have to watch out for with different releases is operating systems. So, for instance, I'm on the next release of Max probably won't support the operating system that this old computer that I'm working on is using. This computer is actually still using XP Professional, and that's because I have releases that go back to Max 9 from my work for TurboSquid, and when Max 2014 comes out, I will get another machine with Windows 8 on it, or Windows 7 on it, because I don't think it's going to support XP. It says student versions are available 2010 through 2013. So that's good. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So you can use whatever you're comfortable with. Personally, I found 2012 to be an excellent release, more stable than the earlier releases, faster, and a lot of times they don't add a lot of new features. They just fix the bugs. Oh, did I say that? No, there's no such thing as bugs. But we're not.
We're still recording.
Yeah, right. Okay. Bugs are just they're features.
They're features. That's right. Well, I mean, obviously they upgrade whenever they make a new, right. When they make a new version. So otherwise, why would they keep making new versions?
Right. No, but it's one of the things that Autodesk has. What happens a lot of times? I mean, Max is wonderful. I will go to my deathbed saying Max is wonderful because I really do love it. And the thing that I love about it is that they listen to their users. They put in features users want. The problem is oftentimes that those features have bugs in them, and then sometimes those bugs aren't really fixable, or they don't take the time to fix it. They always release Max once a year, so it's sometimes if something might take 2 years to change a feature, they don't do that in development. It's rare. Some things like the new particle system that came along, particle flow, they took 3 years to develop that, and that was a rarity. Mostly they make features that come in within a single year. So in any case, I like 2012 in answer to that. Can you show us a little bit of your accumulated modeling experience? Say you're about to start low polygon modeling. What do you do? Character modeling, I can't say I'm a character modeler. I'm not particularly, I don't have anything to show you that would show you how wonderful character modeler I am, because I'm not. I'm a kind of a hard surface modeler. Let me minimize for a second and let me play a movie if I can find it for 1 second here. Shortcut to train wreck. So I'll just show you something that I modeled that is, give it a moment. So I worked for this iPhone game and I modeled this steam engine for this. I have devoted most of my career to training people on Max rather than actually being a production guy. So anyway, so here, let's play this little movie here. And I'm going to stop it for a minute. So this is a train that I modeled for this scene here. And I'll zoom it back here. And this is the thing that we're actually going to use in this class as an example of a typical kind of thing. If I come over here and I'll go grab, is it this one? And say, yes, there we go, continue, and scroll around here. Oops, that's exactly what I was telling you about. So here's just an example of simple kind of hard surface modeling.
Okay.
Hope that gives you something. Okay, so we back?
Actually, I never put us on break. Right.
Right.
So
yeah, right.
With that, why don't we go ahead and everybody, let's take our 5-minute break starting now.
Okay, I'm going to...
In 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so we're back. So I want to try to get through the rest of certain things, so I'm going to kind of condense this a little bit. And I'm going to just real quickly make some, just a very primitive kind of a scene here of some boxes and some pyramids, just to go through the basics, and now I'll make a teapot, and I will change the color of the teapot, something else different like that. Why a teapot? There's somebody in the room, at least one person is thinking, why is there a teapot? You know, back when computer graphics was first getting started, a bunch of mathematicians in Utah were sitting around saying, wow, we can make boxes and we can make pyramids, but we're really not going to get anywhere until we can make real objects. They were having breakfast and they were sitting around a actual teapot. And someone said, oh, you mean like this teapot? And then one of them went away and came back the next day with an algorithm for a teapot. So, excuse me, so teapots now became the symbol of 3D computer graphics. And hence we have this teapot in here. Okay, so I'm going to take that teapot and I'm going to isolate it. Alt-Q on the keyboard is my shortcut for isolation. Alt-Q means that the teapot will be isolated, and now I have a problem, which is that there, it's hiding over on my other screen. Thank you. I have two screens, two monitors. Incidentally, it really helps to have two monitors when you use Macs. Not quite enough real estate with one monitor. So I'm in isolation mode. And if I exit isolation mode, you can see that works like that. So if I'm working on big scenes, Alt-Q, very, very handy. Okay, what am I trying to show you? Make one view here. Transforms. So we've already seen it a little bit. There are three basic transforms: move, rotate, and scale. On the main toolbar, move, rotate, and scale has a flyout. If I click on move or rotate or scale, you can see that in each case, a different gizmo appears. We call this a manipulator or a gizmo. If I hit the plus button on the keyboard, it gets bigger. If I hit the minus button on the keyboard, it gets smaller. So you need to train yourself to use these gizmos and how they operate. If I want to move this, I can move it using the transform gizmo. As I move my mouse over the transform gizmo, the arrows, the shaft of the arrow changes color to yellow. Yellow means active, and that means that that is active. So now I will move this only in the x-axis. This object is lying on this grid. If I go this way, it's now moving in the y-axis only. If I click on the Z, now it's moving up in space. Now it's below the grid. Now I can also use the coordinate rollouts at the bottom. And I can right-click and right-click over the spinners, and now it's at 0, 0, 0. I could type in a value. Let's see where I could just drag a value. Or I could do it interactively. That's the transform gizmo for moving objects. If I put my mouse over the center, now I can move in X and Y. This is still staying exactly at 0 Z depth, but it's moving in 2 dimensions. If I choose this one, now it maybe is under Control Z. If I choose this one, maybe it's gone under Control Z. If I choose rotation, I have a different transform gizmo. The transform gizmo allows me to, again, X, Y, and Z. The way to remember this is red, green, blue, RGB, X, Y, Z. RGB, X, Y, Z. So red, R, is moves like this. It's moving around the X-axis. Green, RG, it's now moving around the Y-axis. Z, now it's moving around the Z-axis. Now notice something. As I'm doing this, notice there are numbers. That's what we call the heads-up display. And that is the amount of rotation that I'm applying there. Undo, undo, undo. How about if I move this and I'll undo the last rotation? I'm back to there. So notice that as I was moving those things, I was doing it in a really uncontrollable way to do it. The way I would like to do this is to use a kind of a snap, angle snap. If I hit the A on the keyboard, that's angle snap. That's the shortcut for it. It's this button here. These are the snap toggles. We'll get into snaps more next week. But if I choose angle snap, now watch when I rotate, 15, 20, 25, 5, 15, like that.
Robert asks,
if I rotate.
Oh, I'm sorry. If he says, I've seen you can enable to move objects in all transform axes. Do you know where the option is to turn it on?
I think there is something under Customize Preferences, Gizmos, Transform Gizmos. Let's see. I've never tried to do that. So I think that if I use this and I click in the center, that lets me move in all three views. I think. Yeah, there I am. I seem to, am I moving? No, I'm not. So I've never actually tried to move something in all three views at once. In all three. I move in two and then one. I'll try to research that and see if I can find that out. I do know that if you hit the X on the keyboard, the transform gizmo disappears. And then, and I also know that there's a transform type-in tool under Tools, is it? Or is it under Edit? Under Edit, there's transform type-in, where I can then use this to type in. And there's a tool that never's gotten a lot of play, Transform Toolbox, that they added that lets you do all of this similar kind of stuff.
He says, how do you change the pivot point for rotations?
Okay. That, in order to do that, you go to the hierarchy and you go to pivot. And you affect pivot only, and then you can, here I'm going to center it to the object, or I'll pick it up and move it wherever I want. X on the keyboard. So, or I can even use the snap tool to snap it to a particular point. So I've moved the pivot. Let's see if I really moved it where I think I have. Nope. Let's turn off. Okay, hold on. I'll snap this. Oh, I don't have snaps set to. Hold on. Set my snaps to vertex. There we go. I'm trying to snap it to the end of this thing, and I think I did. There it is. Okay. Does that answer Robert's question? Yeah, kind of. Oh, no, that's not him.
That was Charlie. Robert also said, I saw in options where you were center box something it said. I'm not sure what he means.
Okay, let's just finish this up. Notice that now it's rotating around that pivot point that you asked for. Max has a thing, I haven't used it in a long, long time, and I have to research it, which is working pivot, that if you're modeling, you can actually shift the pivot around. You can use the working pivot and then shift the pivot around as you're doing modeling. But this pivot that I'm talking about here is just for animation. Okay, we only have 15 minutes left, so what I want to do is let me try to go through a bit more basics and get to the end of my, at least halfway through my presentation. So we've shown you rotation, shown you move and scale. And notice that everything is happening off that pivot point. So I'm going to go affect pivot again, and I'm going to center back to the object so that it's there. Okay. So now I will click, and I will, again, I have the ability to choose. I can, let me do this a little more cleanly here. So I can say that I want to center, to have this scale up and down in 3 axes, or I could scale it in 1 axis, or I could scale it in 2 axes. However you want to do it. And also I can come here and I can choose, this one says scale, select a non-uniform scale. This one is, what does it say? Select and uniform scale. And then this one is called squash and stretch. So if you scale in one axis, it makes up for it in the other. Generally speaking, with Max, you really don't want to scale objects at the object level like I'm doing right here. This will make trouble for you if you are creating hierarchical objects for video games. This kind of a transform will then go down to the children and make trouble. There's a button here that says don't affect children that you can use, but generally speaking, what we do in Max is we use a modifier and then scale the gizmo of the modifier so that we control when the scale happens. Okay, so let's go ahead, and we have this object here. I'll get out of isolation mode, and what I want to, and I've made a peculiar, notice this is now a kind of horribly skewed teapot. Let's see if I can undo enough of that so it's now a normal looking teapot. It's still at a strange angle. If I go here and I'll clear up its rotations, now it's normal. And I'll go back to the modify panel and I'll change the radius of it. This is a parametric object, so I'm not scaling it, I'm changing its actual radius, and I'll make it a 10. Okay, so now, with not much time left, what I want to do is show you the way you can create animation by simply turning on auto key. If you turn on auto key, then you can move to any frame in your timeline. I'm going to choose frame 25. I'm going to choose the move button, and I will move to frame 25 and move the object. Now, as I move the slider back and forth, you'll see I've created animation. I'll go to frame 50. I will move the object over here, go to frame 75. I'll move the object back here. And now you can see I have created a little animation like that. Now similarly, I can make rotation keys. I'll choose rotation. And now, if I go to frame 25 and I rotate this object around at frame 25, you will see that the object starts to rotate right away. So I'm going to undo that. And instead, I set my rotation keys in pairs. At frame 20, I will make a slight rotation, and then at frame 30, I will make the rotation that I want. Now you'll see that the teapot moves forward. It now starts to rotate and ends rotation. So this is the range. The rotation happens between frame 20 and 30. This allows me to control the rotation that I want to have happen. I'll repeat the process here. And repeat the process here. I'm not being very exact about this, but let's play the little animation by hitting the playback button. There is the animation that I've created. Now, I'll turn auto key off, and very quickly I will show you that we can turn this into a little movie. I have two ways to do that. I'm going to come over here to the rendering and the rendering menu, and I can render this to a movie. Actually, they moved this tool. It's now under Tools, Views, grab Viewport, Create Animated Sequence File. I'll hit there, and I'll say I would like to do a custom range from 0 to 100, frame rate every nth frame, percentage of output. This will be 320 by 240, and rendering level. I can decide what kind of level. I'll say Create. Boom, 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 boom. It's done. And now, this is just a viewport grab. Now let's see. There it goes. It's playing smoothly. So that's the first way that I check my animation. And then after that, I can actually go. This is going to be on a black background, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to choose environment. I'm going to pick a different color background. I got a blue background now. So I'll go rendering, render setup. And this will give me a similar dialog box. Now here I would have to decide what renderer I'm using. Now I happen to be set to the scanline renderer, which is not the default. The default nowadays is mental ray renderer. But I'm going to leave this at the scanline renderer just for the sake of this class for the moment here. And I will go back to the common parameters. Again, I'll choose the range being 0 to 100. I'll come over here and I'll choose a file type. You shouldn't really do this usually, but I'm going to do it right now because we're just about out of time. I'm going to call this teapot AVI file. It's going to render directly to an AVI file. I look and see where it's going. It's going to the render output inside of Max on the C drive. I actually don't have much room on my C drive, so I'm going to choose this to 3D Buzz on the E drive and say save. And then I can choose what codec I want to use. Usually we rarely render directly to a movie setup. We instead usually render to sequential files. And I'll say OK. I'll click on render. And now I get a dialog box here. Look at this. This is showing me how fast it's going to go, how long it's going to take. And it's going to take 23 seconds. If you're a truly insane animator, you don't get up now, but instead you sit and watch. And you see all the things that are wrong with it. Your animation will never be perfect. You will always find something else to do. Like right away I see that I don't like that this is, I can see through there.
I think that's true of any art.
Yeah, it is. It is. So anyway, so now this is the part that's totally non-intuitive. You have to then go rendering. You have to go view image file to see the animation. At least it's looking where it was. I'll open it up. And there's the animation that I just created. As quickly and as simply as that. Okay. Just like Maya, just like any other program, it's all about knowing what is it I want to do next and where do I find it. And that's 90% of it. So one thing that I also didn't show is that we've been using a perspective viewport. And in Maya, there's no difference between a camera viewport and a perspective viewport, but Max there is. So if I go Control-C on the keyboard with that perspective viewport active, I now have, if we look at these views, you can now see that there's a camera that's in place. If I turn Auto Key on, let's go to this frame here, and let's pick up the camera, and let's see what happens if I move it. How about if I'm going to try to do it this way. I'm going to try to move it like that, and I'll try to zoom into it. And back here, I'm going to move the camera around like that. Whoops. I'm probably going to make a mess of this. Here it goes, comes around like that. Goes, all right, that's not bad. That's not horrible. And then at the end, we'll shift this over like that. And we'll even zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so notice that now not only have I animated the object, but I have animated the perspective by using a camera. Render it again, overwrite it. Now, of course, when you're doing real-world work, this isn't going to go by so fast. I've worked for companies where we've had 8-hour renderings per frame.
Oh wow!
24-hour renderings per frame. I was sent to Cinesite for the movie Waterworld, and we had 48 hours per frame.
Whoa!
They had to render all month long in order to make seconds of animation.
Wow.
Okay, so we come over here, and then it's wrong. Then when you finally get to see it, it's
and
wrong.
And then that's when you want to just beat your head into something.
Right, yeah. Okay, so anyway, there's that animation that I just created right there. But it's pretty cool that I've actually created, 2 different animations in a matter of seconds. And now, because you can't make me stop, it's like, oh, look, I still have 2 minutes.
If you need to go over a little bit, it's okay.
All right,
we won't beat you, promise.
Okay. All right. So I've just made a box here to make a ground plane, and I'm also going to make a light in the scene, and I'll choose a standard light. And I'll make a spotlight. Let me see. Let me zoom back just a little. I promise, though, I'm not going to run over too late. Okay, so target spot, and I'll make a spotlight from looking at it like that. And let's also put an omni light in the scene over here. Now, what's happening is that I'm not getting the scene lights, so I'll have to choose that. There it is. Okay, and now lo and behold, we had no idea that the teapot is not on the ground. So I'm going to click that teapot and I'm going to move it down to the ground. Wait, did I get the wrong thing? Yeah, I got the light. There's the teapot. Let's get it onto the ground. Now, Mark could be smart and he could do this. He could go. Whoop. That's because I moved the what do you call it? The teapot's pivot point into its center, and that's why it got a little wacko. But anyway, now you'll notice that now we have shadows, and everything is animatable in Max. It's one of the things that really sets it apart from most other programs. So I'm going to actually animate the color of the light. Who knows what's going to happen here? Nope. I've got to turn the auto key on. Actually, I'm using the wrong menu. Okay, so there's the color of the light. It's set to white, and we will make it go to yellow there, and back here we'll have the light color be a kind of pink, and God knows what we're going to get. There it is. It changed color, and did I mention this is fun?
Yay!
I'm having fun. Oh, rendered the wrong viewport. Max likes to do that. There's a way to lock that, but I'll just select it there. Don't forget to turn off auto key. Render again, render setup, and render. And I'm doing the bad thing, which is train yourself that before you hit the render button, you actually save your work. When is Max going to blow up?
Oh, probably when you're rendering.
It's going to blow up when you render. It's going to blow up when you render it. Yeah.
I've noticed that seems to be true with other programs as well.
It has to do with something called memory.
Yes.
That you use up all of it and then it crashes. Okay, if you're reading this, try opening the AVI with another. Windows Media Player should play these files. Okay. I'm just looking at this while this is render farm. Help build a render farm. Yeah, we're building a huge render farm right now. Yeah, it could be. Speaking of Max blowing up all the time, if you have enough memory and you learn to know what it is, it can be reliable. It can get the job done. But if you find that if you render once, if you're doing, if it blows up once, something's wrong. If it blows up twice, something's wrong. If it blows up 3 times, something's wrong with you in that you're letting it blow up 3 times without figuring out what's going wrong. Okay, Mark on the stream, all we saw was a dark bluish background instead of the actual animation in WMP, in Windows Media Player. Really, so you didn't see, okay, so what I should do, cancel, is I'm going to render to QuickTime, and let's see if that handles it. And then we'll see if we can do it with the QuickTime. Okay, so render setup, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't know that was going on. Accepted. I don't see QuickTime. Oh, there's this QuickTime. Okay, and we'll make sure that this is .mov, save, and say OK, and render. And now this is going to take all of a minute. You guys are seeing this, right? You are seeing what's going on in the frame buffer? Yeah, okay. So it's just Windows Media Player or QuickTime Player.
That was weird. I could see it before. I don't know.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm not sure. Okay. And someone there says they have 2010, 2013 never blown up either. You know, is this thing about does Macs blow up? It doesn't blow up. This is like there's like a story from Hinduism that 4 blind men go and they go and look at an elephant, and then they come back and say, "What's an elephant look like?" And one person says, "Elephant's like a tree," and then another one says, "No, elephant's like a snake," and then another one says, "No, elephant's like a big palm leaf." Right, because one guy felt the ear, one guy felt the leg, and one guy felt the trunk. It's the same thing. You got one person that uses Macs for particle effects, and they go, "Well, Macs never blows up." And then you got someone else that uses Macs for animation, with the cat system, and it's blowing up on him all day long. And it's one of those things. So and it completely depends on what plugins you have as well. So in any case, now let's just see if you can see. If I do view image file, I suspect that this is going to use the Windows Media Player to show the QuickTime movie. And I might have to actually get out of here. Nope, it's showing QuickTime. So QuickTime Player is being used, and it's just taking a second. It's taking more than a second. There it goes. Okay. Can you guys see that now? We can see it this time. All right. Well, this also is just a very representative of what happens in Macs, which is that something goes wrong. You don't know why it goes wrong, but you figure out a way around it. You may never know why it went wrong as long as you can figure out a way around it. So, maybe years later you'll find out why. But working in this program has a lot of that going on, which is like, I don't know what I did wrong, but try this and do this, and boom, there it is. Okay, got it to work. Still don't know, but it's practical. Okay, so that puts us at 6:05. I think that's enough for today. What I will do regarding homework for this particular class, I would like you to simply do what I did. Now, I don't know exactly how homework works. As the first class I ever taught for 3D Buzz, so I'll find out precisely. But really, if I'm sure I'm going to post some kind of written assignment. But what the assignment really is just go ahead and make a quick little animation. Try to make a quick little animation where you animate an object that moves, rotates, and the camera moves.
And they don't have to get complex with their modeling or anything like that. Just use what you've done here to make a quick.
Right. Now, if you really want to go, if you just can't stand making teapots and boxes, then you can go to the TurboSquid website, and you can buy a cheap model or find a free model. Make sure you get max.max. And then also, some of you guys might have not seen TurboSquid. So here I am at TurboSquid. Let's go back to, actually, let's just start over here. Let me just type in TurboSquid so you'll see how to do this. And this is a shameless plug. These are the guys I work for. This is the program I put together, Checkmate Pro. From here I can say, let's say cars. And I was a TurboSquid user for years before I got hired from them, and I love them because, look, there's $5 models, there's $100 models, there's $1,000 models, and there even are free models. So if I say free cars, of course I'd rather that you buy a model, but this model's free. It's 15 megabytes. It uses the mental array renderer. It was posted a couple of weeks ago. It's got 500,000 polygons, but you can go download a model and you can try to do something with it if you want. So I will leave it at that. Okay. Yes, you need to learn mental ray and V-ray. Yes, you wouldn't download a car. Yeah, well, I downloaded a bunch of free models this morning just thinking about this. And the truth is at TurboSquid is we really would prefer not to have any free models. Obviously, we're in business to make money. And the best models are not the free models. But from this class, also, Max comes with some models. So not a lot. But if I go open, save changes, no. These are the models right here that Max comes with. So you can also feel free to use those. There's a BMW 7. I think these are all models that comes with Max. Here's a Ford Focus. Here's a camper. I'd really actually rather that you just use boxes and teapots just for the point of making sure you understand how to do that. So that's my preference. There's no telling what kind of uncomfortable situations you're going to find yourself with. This seems to be one model, so you could use it in any case. Okay, are there any other questions before we close it down for today?
Any questions?
Okay, well, I hope that was not too much of a barrage of information. When we meet again next time, keep track of your questions, and there probably should be a way that you could get a hold of me between now and next week if you really have to. Do they have any kind of policy on that?
They can email you. If you want.
So go ahead. I'm going to, if you want to put it in the chat here. My email is turbosquid.com.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Or you can use mark.gerhard@sbcglobal.net. And yeah, I'm giving away the store here. mgerhard51 is my Skype name. Everybody can use your Skype name. Oh, yes. The very, very sad piece of this is that I'm in California, so I'm on West Coast time, but I'm really on New Orleans time. So I sit down at this computer at 7 o'clock. I get up at 3 o'clock my time. I am in front of Skype and email constantly at that time. And then because this is my work, I shut the computer down at 3:30 and I lock the door and I try not to go in here. Having spent 20 years doing this, I spent the first 10, on the computer until 2 in the morning, and then getting up at 6 in the morning and keep on going. And then after about 20 years of that, I realized that it's actually good to have a life. It's actually good to get away from the computer and do something with your hands. Dig in the dirt, play a musical instrument, dance, sing, tell stories, act, do something real, do something that doesn't involve the computer. And I know it sounds like heresy. So, and I know if you guys are young, you're not going to succeed if you listen to me. So it's okay for you to do it, but when you, after putting in your time, it's good to get away from it. And that's what I'm going to do in a few minutes. So you now know how to get a hold of me, and you know what to do. So good luck with it. And then we will continue the class next session. We will get into polymodeling, and that is really the serious thing that most of you guys probably want to make characters or make environments, do game modeling, and I will show you the tools and the resources for doing that. All right?
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.